Hey, welcome to Wonderful Works Talks, where we talk all about the disability ministry mission of helping churches become accessible for all. I'm your host, Barb Stanley, and today we're going to be talking about an important aspect of disability ministry, and that is taking a leap of faith. But first, I want you to stop and ask yourself a question. If you knew you couldn't fail, what is the one thing that you would do for your mission? Well, today we're going to be talking all about taking a leap of faith and more through our own experience starting Wonderful Works Ministry. So our special guest today is my esteemed colleague, special education consultant Leah Whicker from Wonderful Works Ministry, and myself. And we're going to share all about our journey and what we have learned. Before we get started, let me tell you a little bit about what we do at Wonderful Works Ministry. We create online disability ministry resources for churches to help train their teams to serve families affected by disability. And we do a lot of that in these 5-minute animated videos that we make. So by now we've been up and running for about 4 years, and we have a lot of people in our Facebook group. We've had some opportunities to collaborate on some really cool projects. We've been able to kind of step out and do some cool things in our field. And I think a lot of people that see us now wonder, how did we get started? And I'm going to tell you, it's probably not the way you think that it would happen, but it was a huge leap of faith. So just a little background, I did grow up in a family affected by disability. My brother Brian has autism, and church was one of the few places we could go where he felt really safe and always did well. So that was something that was always really important to me. In my early years, my first career was in graphic design and illustration and copywriting. I was one of those creative people. And then after my kids were born, I kind of fell into a job at our local church. So for about 7 years, I worked at my local church on the staff, and I specialized in church administration and ministry mobilization of volunteers and leaders. And I just absolutely loved that. But I also, because I had that pull towards disability ministry, felt called to start a disability ministry at our church. And we got tons and tons of support on that, and we were able to launch a successful disability ministry where we started getting other churches calling us and asking for help to launch their own. So then I started feeling like I just had this feeling like I wanted to launch a national disability ministry that somehow help teach other churches to do kind of what we had been doing at our church. And that's really all I knew. I knew I had that seed planted in me, but I had absolutely no idea what that was going to look like. So what I decided to do was to not wait on God to show me the next steps, but instead come up with my own brilliant plan of how I was going to do this. So I decided that it'd be a great idea to quit my job in my ministry career that I really enjoyed and go back to school to get a master's degree in a field that I had never even taken one single undergraduate class in. So that's a good lesson for people looking for higher education. You might want to take a class in something before you get your master's in it. But I had this really elaborate plan that I had made up on how I was going to make this itch to start a disability ministry nationally happen. And my plan was I was going to get my master's degree in social work. I was going to become a counselor part-time. And on the other times when I wasn't making big bucks being a counselor, I would start a disability ministry networking groups in my town. So this was my plan. It seemed like all of the pros and cons boxes seemed to check out, and that is what I did. But there was one big problem, and that was that this plan was not God's plan for me. So all the things that I did not work out at all. It turned out I'm not a fit for social work, and as much as I'm so thankful there are people who can do it, I am not one of those people that can handle a lot of trauma. So that meant that although I was getting ready to graduate with a master's degree in social work, I was not able to actually work in the field because I just can't handle trauma. Again, please take a class in something before you get a master's degree, just word to the wise. So now, of course, Becoming a counselor was only the first part of the plan. If you remember, the other part of my plan was as soon as I graduated, I was going to start these in-person local networking groups for disability ministry, which was great because I graduated May 2020. So, Leah, you remember what that was?
Oh, yeah, lots of Zoom calls.
Yeah.
And everything was shut down.
So that is when the whole world shut down, and now the second part of my plan also became impossible. So now I'm graduating. I've quit my job. I have no career. I'm not able to go forward in the field that I got a master's degree with and convinced my husband this would be a really great investment. I have nothing. I am at home, no job, no school, nothing. But because God can work things out, I did have on the calendar, I was going to be a special guest speaker for our denomination's children's ministry district meeting. And because the world had just shut down, it had gone to something called Zoom, which no one had heard of at the time. And what happened was I thought, how am I going to explain disability ministry to these children's ministry directors if I cannot pass out any of my handouts?
Right, yeah.
And so I thought, wouldn't it be nice to have a 5-minute video that would explain things? And since my original career was in graphic design and illustration, I just made one. And that is how Wonderful Works started.
Wow, that's amazing. And how else has God been opening doors along the way for you?
So once we did that first video, we got a good reception. And one of my friends, who was a children's ministry director, again, because it was the pandemic, she was offered to be in this national children's ministry online cohort. And they said, you can pay whatever you want to pay because it's the pandemic and we'll let you in. So she offered to pay $5. And she got in and she said, in June, we're going to do a thing on disability ministry. So if you can get enough videos done by June, then I will share it with this national cohort.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, so we started in May. In June, we put together like 4 or 5 videos, and she shared them. And so here's what I want people to know about the first part about taking a leap of faith, is part of that is being courageous enough to do something new badly.
That's great.
Because those 4 or 5 videos that we put out there were not good. Because I didn't know how to do animation or even to make a video.
Yeah.
But it didn't matter because if it's God's plan,
Right.
And I think sometimes when you have to put your pride aside, He will more than make up for it. So that's how we got our first 60 people in our Facebook group, was from this $5 cohort that my friend did.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love that advice too about just stepping out in faith sometimes and knowing that you're not going to do it perfectly, but you may fail. I found that too. Like when I stepped out in faith to go back to school and get my intervention specialist licensure, I knew, like when I was in the classroom working with kids, it wasn't going to be perfect all the time. And that was hard for me initially because I like to do things well. Yeah. But knowing that God's in it, God's got you, is such a huge, valuable lesson to take. And He's definitely had us every step of the way. So, yeah.
The other thing that I learned right in the beginning of starting Wonderful Works is that because I was starting after some failures, that was the absolute best place for me to start, because I was willing to take bigger risks because I felt like I had really nothing to lose. For me, what that risk looked like was putting myself out there online because I hate being on camera. Like, I am very notorious for absolutely hate being on camera. And so doing those intros and outros was extremely frightening for me. And I remember so many times when we were getting this started, taping myself and thinking like, man alive, how desperate am I? Like, how desperate am I to try something new, even though it's the last thing in the world I want to do, put my face out there.
Right. Yes, I remember having those feelings too when we would do some recorded interviews and things like that at the beginning. Like, oh gosh, I'm not meant for this. I don't know if I'm made to do interviews and webinars and all of those things. So I definitely struggled with that too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. If I hadn't been so desperate, like if my plan had worked out at all,
right,
I would have never done those videos. And so sometimes I think when we're looking at taking leaps of faith, we need to know that some of the hard parts are the gifting.
Right. Yeah. It's growing us through those difficult seasons or when the timeline's not exactly right. Like I remember working with Wonderful Works and helping you create videos or just giving you some advice when you were creating them. And so wanting to join you and do it more full-time or at least part-time, but it wasn't God's timing. So I went back to school and taught in the public schools for a while. And then in hindsight, like all of that has taught me so much and given me so much like a better perspective on things and given me a lot more experience that I can draw from when I'm doing Wonderful Works now. So it's been a blessing and it's been in God's timing.
Yeah, I learned that same lesson with God's timing. And then also, like, even if you make a mistake, He will use that. Because, like, when I went and I did the master's degree in social work, which I, again, wasn't really able to go forward in social work since I can't handle trauma. And that seems to be, who knew that might be a part of that field? I guess maybe if you took a class in it before you got your master's degree, you might find out. But anyway, in hindsight, even though I didn't go into social work, I do use so many things that I learned. And it was actually not a waste of time at all. I have used all of the community organizing that I learned, the leadership skills. So He was there that whole time, even when I was doing my own plan, still like taking pieces of it to help.
Yeah, so don't get discouraged if the timeline isn't exactly what you think it should be. I mean, I think we both have learned from our own experiences, like since we're planners, things that we think like, oh, it should have gone this way. But in hindsight, now looking back, God used all of those other things to kind of equip us for what we're doing now.
100%.
Yeah.
So another question that we get a lot about starting this ministry is, how were we able to keep doing it when it looked so discouraging? So like I have this one friend, when we first started doing these videos, I would work for a long time trying to learn how to do animation. I'd work for a long time trying to learn how to do animation. I'd spend a long time on each of these videos and then put it out on social media, and we'd get like 8 views. And she said, how do you not quit?
Right. Yeah, that would be discouraging.
Yeah.
Because you put a lot of time into those videos. I don't think people realize how long it takes to create just one video.
Yeah, they are a little labor intensive. But when it was discouraging, here's how we didn't quit. I was taught that when you're doing something, you need to just look at audience of one. Meaning like, is God pleased with what I'm doing? And if He is, I'm going to keep doing it. And that is literally the only way that we got through all of the discouraging times, the times we felt like giving up. Because even when we got the 8 views, I think He would be pleased that we spent this much time doing it. And He doesn't care if it looks amazing or not. And that's why we kept going. And then eventually, in His timing, we started growing. But that's something I do want people to listen to. If you are considering taking a leap of faith or trying something hard, know it's going to have discouraging times, and that when you stop trying to measure success from the culture or from your strategic plan, and you start trying to look at what is success as far as God thinks, it's one of the most freeing things you will ever do.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's a huge point. So what has been the scariest part of this journey for you, and how have you been able to overcome that?
The 2 scariest parts for me are, and I said this before, but I really don't like being on camera. And I do tend to be a little bit of a vain person. And now I'm 50, and now I'm using high resolution cameras. And that has been the scariest part. And so what I've had to do really is I've had to learn to put my vanity aside. That's been really like my biggest lesson, is that I have to stop thinking in terms of like, what do I want? And think about what is it that's important. So looking 50 on the camera is one of my scariest parts. But then the other thing for me that's hard is just the fundraising part and figuring out, here we are today, here's where we want to go. How do we get all of the provisions that we need to get there? And what I am learning to do is I just have to trust that He's going to do it for us, that we're going to do our part, but that when you're in ministry, we're not supposed to have every answer figured out.
Yeah. Just taking that next step of obedience and trusting that he's going to provide.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about you, Leah?
So I think one of my scariest parts about working with Wonderful Works was just when I did accept the position in the public school, and I really enjoyed my job working with my students. I had a great classroom of kids, and I really enjoyed the people that I worked with and what I was doing. But at the same time, we were pursuing a grant and potentially getting some funding to hire a position for Wonderful Works. So for me, it was difficult because just the timing of when we would find out if we received the grant and if we would actually be able to hire someone versus like me potentially staying at the job that I loved. And so I really had to pray about it a lot.
Yeah.
And it was a little scary at first because I was stepping out in faith to tell my school, like, hey, I'm going to pursue this position with Wonderful Works because it's just a passion and a calling. It took a lot of prayer and just time to basically like trust God that if I stepped out in faith, if I did step down from my teaching position, that he would provide, if not through the grant, through other means, just really trusting God each step of the way.
To just clarify for those listening, what happened with Leah was we were still waiting to hear if we were going to get some funding from a grant collaboration opportunity when she had to decide if she was going to leave her teaching job or not. So she actually took a leap of faith to resign from her teaching job before we knew if we had the funds to even pay her a salary. So that was tremendous faith on her part.
So it's definitely been difficult, but as you said before, like those difficult times really help grow me in my faith, and God uses those times too to help increase our faith in him and just know that he will provide. And so that's helped me in my faith journey since then as well.
Yeah, and on that for me, so one of the things I learned really early on is because I am a strategic thinker and I do kind of like to plan out strategically. When I was starting Wonderful Works, I started talking to other leaders in the community that ran nonprofits. And I remember one in particular, I went and asked, like, what is the most important thing that you have learned when you're working with your board? Because we're getting ready to put our board together. And I got my pen and paper out and I was ready to start taking notes on what he said. And he said, the most important thing you can do is pray.
Wow.
And I was like, wait, what? I thought you were going to give me like a strategy. Sure. And he said, so we have learned at our board meetings, if all we get done is praying, that is the most important point.
Yeah.
And that really, really spoke to me because I think at that moment I had really realized that what we are attempting to do with starting this ministry from scratch and really going beyond our wildest dreams was so far above my head from what I can strategically control, but this guy had it right. So we have really tried to center Wonderful Works on prayer and seeking God first.
Yes.
And that is one of our key cultural aspects of Wonderful Works and is really important to our board, which is why our Bible verse is 1 Chronicles 16:11, seek his face always. So for me, that trust piece is an ongoing leaning in prayer piece.
Yeah, it definitely has been from the beginning. And also just having that time of prayer before and after each board meeting and having people intentionally praying for us throughout the years just been so important too. So.
And that's really helped me as we've been growing this is with, I think I am someone who does enjoy business, but I also think there's a difference between business and ministry. And I think one of those differences is the gaps. I call it the gaps. But like in ministry, you may know where you want to get to go, but you have a gap of like you don't know how something is going to be provided.
Yes.
And so I think one of the things in ministry leap of faith is really embracing the gaps. So that is where you really want to seek God and invite other people in. Like one thing I will say about Wonderful Works is that we very much invite people in to pray for us. There's lots and lots of people praying. And I feel like when you do that and you have this posture of knowing you don't have it all together, that is when really you see God do amazing work. And that has definitely been our story.
Yeah, it's just also like as leaders, it's comforting to know that people have your back and they're intentionally praying for you. And we definitely see that prayers works and that God provides, and just it's just really helpful to have that.
Yeah, I feel like it's been a difference maker. So one way that I have seen this play out with us is talking about, we did get some partnership and some grant funds that are helping us do what we do today. But how that happened, again, was like everything in our story, God already had it orchestrated, and we just came along for the ride. So how we kind of stumbled into this was, we had been accepted to be a speaker at a conference in a different part of the United States, and because I'm really cheap, I bought two non-refundable tickets, airline tickets, and then the conference was canceled.
I don't know.
And so we decided we'll go ahead and go to where this conference was going to be, because our denomination had headquarters there, and we thought, well, maybe we can just have a meeting there instead. So it's not like some great strategy. It was like, literally, I was cheap, and so we decided to just roll with it.
Right.
And then when we got to the meeting at the denomination, they were like, what do you think if we work together?
Yeah.
None of it was planned
No.
by me or by our team, but it was all planned by God. And that's really been one of my biggest takeaways, is that my role in this is to keep doing what I think God wants me to be doing, but don't be fooled into thinking I'm in charge of this.
Definitely praying about each step before we do it, but no, God's in control of everything. So what has been the most fulfilling part about this journey for you, Barb?
A couple of different things. Like, I really like identifying where other people are talented and gifted, and part of what we have in our Wonderful Work structure is trying to get other people to pour in with what they're gifted in.
Yes.
So talking to other leaders and other organizational people, and giving them places where they can shine, is really fulfilling for me.
Yeah. You're good at that too. You're really good at finding positions for everyone to shine, as you like to say. So
yeah, thank you. And then the other thing, and this is, again, I think from God's plan, going back throughout my life, is I went into graphic design as a college student way back in the early 90s, because I did not have the college funds to go to the school I wanted to go to. And the school I wanted to go to had a special effects film program. So my dream was to go into film. But because at the time in my life that wasn't an option, I wasn't able to go into film. And now here I am 30 years later, and now we're doing videos and we're starting to look at film, and it's like, it's been very fulfilling to me because creatively I enjoy it so much. But really, what I think it's been kind of changing in my relationship with God, in that I realize He's had this the whole time.
yes, yeah.
Like, when I was feeling bad, I couldn't go into special effects or go into film. He was already like, I got you, girl.
Yeah, it's already part of His plan.
Yeah, I got you. Just hang on. And that has really changed. I don't know. I think it's been really made me feel loved in a way by God, in a way that I maybe did not realize before.
So change your perspective a little bit.
Yeah.
Just how He's got you.
Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah, and that's really one of the things I want people to take away today, is like, I think we all have these in our stories. Like, when we look back at our story and we say, why didn't this happen then? Or where was God when this happened? I've just learned now that, I am 50, so you have lived a while. Like, He's not having those same types of panic that I've had throughout the years.
Yeah. Kind of reminds me of my story a little bit. So I studied early childhood education at Ohio State, but at that time, which was also many years ago, they required you to do a 5th year to get your teacher licensure. And just how it worked out with when I got married and my husband getting a job in another city, we ended up moving. So I wasn't able to complete that program at the time. And if I had, I would have had that gen ed certification, and my path would have looked a lot different too. But because I was able to postpone that a little bit and then wait until my kids were older and then have experiences working with people with disabilities and really having that passion for wanting to work in the classroom with kids with disabilities and just making church better for them as well, I can see, kind of looking back, how God orchestrated all of that too. Like, had I continued on and gotten my master's degree, I probably would have stayed in that lane and stayed doing early childhood education, which would have been fine. But my passion's really disability ministry. I just didn't know it at the time. So
Right.
I'm grateful that it didn't work out back then the way that I wanted it to, maybe, because now I can see like, oh, God was setting this all up. But at the time, I didn't know that. So just trust the journey that God has you on, I would say to people.
Yeah.
Like he knows, he has the big picture and he's got you. So
Yeah, that's really been my biggest takeaway too, is it has made me look differently at my disappointments in the past. Because if I would have been able to go to the school I wanted to go to, and I would have become a special effects film person, I would never be doing this.
Right.
And this I know is what God had for me. And I would so grateful now that this is where he placed me.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. It's hard to think about how things might have been different, because you know that this is a plan that God has for you clearly, but at the time we just didn't know it. So yeah, it's been a blessing. So what would you tell others who are considering taking their own leap of faith, Barb?
What I would tell someone who's thinking about trying something new and taking a leap of faith is don't wait until you have it all perfect. Because I think a lot of times people miss out on opportunity to make a difference or do what God has for them because they feel like they aren't the best at it.
Yep.
And I don't think that really is what God is measuring. I feel like what God is looking for is your heart. So like when I look back at our story, especially when I look back at some of the first videos that we made, which we are now remaking, they're really rough. Like, because I didn't know how to do animation. I'd never done it before. And I was just teaching myself. So some of them are really not at the professional level that we have now. But when I think like, was God pleased by that?
Right. And it was still benefiting people too. Like, I even remember getting feedback from that. So
it was benefiting people. But for me, that's with my background in art. I'm not thinking like this looks amazing. But I think, was God pleased by that? And I think yes. And I think sometimes even when we are clunky in doing something and we're awkward and we're learning and we are taking the risk of not being great at something in front of people, I would think that would make God even more pleased.
Yeah.
And I really feel like that is a big part of the Wonderful Work story, is that it was about wanting to do what he's asking us to do even when it wasn't perfect.
Just keep showing up and keep doing things even though it's difficult. Knowing that, we're working towards helping people and just kind of the big picture of what we're trying to do and who we're trying to help. So
yeah, and for me, I think like the biggest takeaway I've had from this whole leap of faith journey is, one, your leap of faith where you end up is not going to look like what you thought. So don't cling too tightly to your plan and be open to what his plan is. And two, it really is that dying to self. Like, I can't say that enough times. Like, I really don't like being on camera. Having to put my pride away, that sometimes when I'm going to be doing these things, my hair is going to look bad most of the time, or I'm going to look tired or whatever, and knowing that it doesn't matter because this isn't about me.
Right. Yeah.
And same thing like when you're trying something new, like you're speaking publicly for the first time, or you're doing an animation, you have no idea how to do it. Like it's being okay with the world seeing your imperfections.
Yeah. That's huge.
Yeah.
Like that was one of the biggest takeaways that God's slowly been teaching me over the years, is to be okay not being perfect. I've been a perfectionist most of my life. So even like stepping out in faith and pursuing the special education licensure and being in situations that I really wasn't prepared for, and trusting God to be there, trusting him to provide. And it's been difficult, but it gets easier, I think, as you do it more and more. So
it does. And then for me too, like just learning, like, I mean, I can't say this enough times, but like, it's not about you. It's not about yourself. And so for me, that means like sometimes I have to make decisions as a leader that are going to benefit the organization that might not benefit me personally. And it's really learning how to let go, and then really leaning into keep praying for guidance.
Yeah, like surrendering what you what you want, or what you have in mind for God's greater plan, and and walking in step with him, and praying often, and trying to really be guided by what he wants, which can be sometimes a lot different than what we have envisioned.
So Leah, let me ask you, how has your journey in Wonderful Works and taking this leap of faith impacted your faith?
Taking the leap of faith to join Wonderful Works has helped my faith journey because I really had to pray a lot before I joined Wonderful Works because I had accepted a position at a school and I was really enjoying what I was doing. I was teaching kids with disabilities. I had an awesome group of students that I was working with every day and just a great supportive school, great supportive staff. So I really enjoyed what I was doing, but I knew that God was calling me to work with Wonderful Works because I had been praying about it for a long time. I had been blessed to be able to consult along the way as Wonderful Work was growing. And so when you approached me and told me about the possibility to join Wonderful Works, I did at first have to pray a lot about it just because I wanted to make sure that it was the right decision and that that's where God was leading me to go because I really felt I was in a great position to impact the lives of kids where I was too. So I remember praying a lot about it and just really reflecting on both options and trying to determine what God wanted me to do. And I just remember a couple times God specifically spoke to me through people's messages that I heard, sermons and things like that, prayers that people had prayed around me during that time. And I just really knew that God wanted me to do that. So when I took the leap of faith to resign from my position as a teacher in a school and work for Wonderful Works, but I had to surrender my own plans for my life and really trust God and know that He had a bigger picture and a bigger plan. And that's grown my faith because I've seen Him provide. I can see, like in hindsight now, about a year in, how much God has provided for me over the year, and just how He's used this extra time for other things in my life, like investing with my family and things like that too. So it's just grown my faith in that I know I can trust God. Yeah. What about you?
It changed my perspective on my relationship with God, and it's helped me to see some things differently than I did before. And I think one of the things that has really been evident in my journey with this is not just how much God loves each one of us, which has been clear in this, and how He is with us even in the times that don't make sense to us, which has been a reoccurring theme here.
Yeah.
But in the beauty of the people He puts around us.
Yeah.
So definitely. One of my very, very favorite parts of this ministry is seeing the other people who are passionate about this field and the people who don't even know anything about disability ministry but want to help, and seeing how God brings these people into your life and how you all work together. And it's made me feel really grateful for the way His love pours out through others.
Yeah. Yeah. And we just came back from a conference, a national conference for disability ministry in the church. And I agree, like that was one of the most encouraging things for me. It's always one of my favorite times a year because we can gather with those people that just want to pour out in the disability community. And it's just such an encouragement to me.
I think another thing that has really changed my perspective on things is I've had to be forced to stop and think, not from my own perspective on everything, but ask myself, like, how would God see this? And so one of that is when you're starting something new, if you're an entrepreneur, and you're really worried about, how do I make this successful? How do I fund it? That's like really what every entrepreneur worries about. And you can kind of get into this again, looking at the culture, what is successful, and you can almost see the people also in your field as competitors.
Right.
And there can be a fear like, oh, this ministry is doing something we were going to do, and maybe they're doing it better than us. And so part of what I've learned in this is to stop and ask myself, whenever I feel afraid about something, is God afraid of that? Is God fearing like, oh, this organization might do this better than Barb's? Well, of course not.
Right.
No. He's thinking, hooray, there's more people doing this, and hooray. He's rooting for all of us.
Right.
So that's been a big game changer for me to get out of the comparison trap and know that God always has a way forward.
Yeah. And it's so encouraging. Just like I said, we just came back from that conference just to see what everybody's doing and how everybody's impacting disability ministry in kind of a different way and collaborating with everyone.
Yeah. And I also have learned that like nothing in my life has been wasted.
Mm-hmm.
So I look at all the different seasons that I've been in, and you think at the time they feel unrelated.
Yeah.
But when you do kind of get into where you are maybe meeting the calling God has for you, all those things add up.
Yeah. They all come together and make sense all of a sudden.
Like for me, like I grew up, my brother had autism. It was very difficult because it was in the 70s and 80s and there were no resources. And so that was a tough time. But that poured some seeds into me.
Right.
And then being an artist for 10 years, I did do graphic design and learned all about production for 10 years. That was a season. And then I accidentally went to work for my church. Pretty much the whole story is like God just dragging me places. But like I ended up working at my church, which was something I had never planned to do. And so then I had like 7 years of learning how to run a church. And then the part in social work where it was kind of a dark season for me. And I learned a lot about personal perseverance and being okay with not being okay in those 2 years. All of those things, when he was ready for us to take this leap of faith, all of those things came together.
Yeah, you don't see it at the time, but all those situations that you're in are teaching you lessons and preparing you for what's next. So.
And then this other thing I just throw out there too, the other thing I've really learned is, again, coming back to the people God puts in your life. I just want you to hear me say, if you're not someone who is feeling like you're supposed to take a leap of faith, or you're thinking like someone starting something new is for other people, if you are someone who is pouring into those people, like encouragement, mentorship, any of those things, you are part of their journey.
Yes.
You are part of that new thing. Because like, I feel like for us, yes, we maybe were the ones that started this, but if it hadn't been for like some of the mentors in my life pouring leadership skills into me all those years, or the people who were like, you only got 8 views, but keep on going.
Yeah.
We wouldn't be here. So you matter just as much.
Yeah.
That is valuable and a part of the plan that God has for each of us. That is important.
I mean, that's huge for some people. They need that encouragement. So just having that would be something to keep them going. And
never think like, oh, I don't have a gift that matters. So if you're someone that feels passionate about something and you feel like I don't feel called to do this right now, find what you can do to support someone else who is doing what you're passionate about, because that is 100% just as important.
Absolutely.
All right, Leah, so if there's one thing you can leave with people listening today about taking a leap of faith or what you've learned in this journey, what do you want them to know?
I would say definitely take the leap of faith. But before you do that, spend a lot of time in prayer and just kind of reflect back on your life and see how God's been using the different situations like we talked about before and setting you up for what he has for you to do next. And then invite people in. I would say nobody's going to be a complete expert in everything. And it means so much more when you have that community with you, doing ministry with you or doing the next thing with you. Find those people that have that same passion that you have and work with them. I think that's such an important part of taking that leap of faith. And when you do it with other people, it's less scary too, right?
Yeah,
you're doing it together. So you can kind of bounce ideas off of each other or, support one another and things like that. So I would say definitely pray, seek God, make sure that you're doing what you believe that God's telling you to do, but then also surround yourself with other people that can support you along the way.
Yeah, so for me, the one thing I would leave with you, if you're going to take a leap of faith, is know that it's going to be messy. And know that that is okay. And it's messy by design. Because if we took a leap of faith and everything was perfect and we had it all handled ourselves, then I don't think we're taking the leap of faith God wants us to take.
Yeah.
Because he wants us to need him. And so embrace that.
Yeah.
And be prepared along the way to surrender all of the things that are comfortable to you. I guess that's really my biggest takeaway. It would have been more comfortable to me to follow my bullet point strategy. And it would have been a lot more comfortable to me if I could have shot these videos when I was 25. But that's not how it ended up. And it's been growing for me to embrace my imperfections and be okay with not even pretending to be perfect.
Yeah, and surrender your expectations,
Yes.
like what you think are going to happen. Just know that God probably has a different plan.
He does, yeah.
And it will be better.
So that is what we have learned so far from our Wonderful Works journey, that God didn't need us to be perfect or strategic or even that great at anything. All He wanted was for us to seek Him, trust His plan, and be willing to keep stepping out in faith, even when it was hard. Today, we have over 100 animated training videos, more than 1,200 leaders in our Facebook group community. We speak at national conventions on disability ministry, consult with churches, and coming in a few months, we'll be releasing an adapted discipleship online library, which is made in partnership with the Church of the Nazarene, thanks to a grant from the Lilly Endowment. And this library will feature even more free disability ministry resources for all churches and families to use to help make church and the gospel accessible for all. So keep checking back for more progress on this exciting project. So what I'll leave with you today is this. In the beginning of this podcast, we asked you a question. If you knew you could not fail, what is the one thing you would do for your mission? Well, now I'm going to ask you an even more important question. Even if you could fail, what could you do for your mission that would be worth the risk? To learn more about Wonderful Works, visit our website at wonderfulworks.net. And if you like this podcast, please subscribe and share with others. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.